So at this point, college football fans everywhere know what a wild class Alabama just signed for the class of 2023. But yesterday, with the rankings updating, we need to revisit this because what was a wild class turned into an absolutely insane haul for the Crimson Tide, including 9 5-stars, something. Well, we've got a breakdown. Before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you excited with the recruiting class Alabama got during the 23 cycle? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and comment down below as those interactions are massive to content creators such as myself. And we're on a push to 20,000 subscribers. I'd love nothing more than to have you a part of this unbelievable community. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And this class is one I've been talking about at length for quite some time. For those of you that have been around the channel for an extended period of time, you'll remember when A&M signed that wild class last season, I said that the Crimson Tide had a chance to break that class's record with this class. Now, they are just shy, but it is still an insane haul. One we need to break down. And really, I want to start with a very top-down approach to this class. Let's really get an understanding of how concentrated the talent is. If we look and use the 24/7 Sports composite to look at the rankings, Alabama has 10 players that rank inside the top 50. They have 3 players that rank inside the top 10. 14 of their class rank inside the top 100. 20 are top 200 players. And out of the 28 signees in Alabama's class, 24 of them rank as 24/7 Sports top 300 players in their composite, which is absolutely insane. Now, you may be asking yourself, what about the 4 that rank outside? Well, the 4 that rank outside include 2 individuals who are coming out of the JUCO ranks, so they're not actually eligible for the 24/7 Sports top 300 prospects in the nation. So they can't count into those. However, if you look at where they rank in terms of their rating, both of those individuals in Malik Benson and Justin Jefferson would have been squarely in the top 300 prospects in the nation, giving Alabama 26 of their 28 being top 300 guys. The remaining 2, one of them is a kicker, a specialist, which are pretty much always going to be 3-star prospects. You can look across the board. That's just the norm of the industry. And the other one is an interior offensive lineman who personally I think is still a little bit underrated, but was a massive riser throughout the backstretch of their recruiting process because they have a ton of ability, and they're an individual that Alabama fans need to be very excited about because I do believe they are very gifted. So this class is so stacked with talent, and before we really start diving in, I do want to give a quick disclaimer because anytime we're talking about recruiting ranks, I always get comments that say, but recruiting ranks don't matter. It matters what happens when they get here, and you're not totally wrong. Development is king here. We need to see what happens once they get on campus. And in no way, shape, or form is a 5-star rating a guarantee that that individual will translate from being a superstar at the high school ranks to a superstar at the collegiate ranks. However, and this is a very important however, there is the blue chip ratio for a reason. And what the blue chip ratio is if we look at the last few national champions, you pretty much will have to have a 50% blue chip ratio to enter into that conversation of being able to compete for a national championship. So while recruiting rankings are by all means not the end all be all, they do hold some weight whenever there is a blue chip ratio. So with that in mind, let's jump into this class. And where do we want to begin? Seriously, where do we want to begin? Because there are so many different ways we could go. We could start with the 3 individuals that rank inside the top 10 for the Crimson Tide, and that's Keon Keeley, who comes in at number 2, standing 6'6", around 240 pounds. And this guy right here has got a ton of ability. If you watched the All-American game, he beat top tackles in a myriad of ways, whether just straight bull rushing them, where he genuinely was lifting guys off their feet and putting them in the dirt. This guy is advanced. He's advanced in his size, speed, strength, technique. This is a huge win for the Crimson Tide, and there's a reason why he comes in as a top 3 player in the nation and the number 2 prospect in all of high school football. Very much well-deserved. Excited to see what he does. And he is entering in to one of the most loaded rooms in all of college football. Personally, I think it's the most loaded room in all of college football, which is that outside linebacker edge rush group for the Crimson Tide. And if we just look at the 5 stars in that room, we're just going to name the 5 stars. We're not even going to talk about the blue chip 4 stars, to which there are several that could have a big season. We're just going to focus on the 5 stars. You have Braswell, you have Turner, now you have Keeley, you have Jeremiah Alexander. Outside of that, you still have Pierre. And if we're getting super technical, Quay Russaw is counted as an edge guy. Now, I expect him to play more stand-up linebacker, but he is counted as an edge guy, which gives the Crimson Tide more 5 stars in one room than some teams have on their entire roster, which is just wild. But he is so talented in Keon Keeley, I could actually see him getting playing time this year. And I gave you that room being so loaded to preface it into that point. All of those names, and Keeley is a guy that could absolutely play. He is that gifted. Can't wait to see what he does. The next player we have to talk about is Caleb Downs. And if you're asking me, I think this guy has an argument to be the number 1 player in high school football. I think he's that good. He's the number 1 safety in the nation, a top 10 player, and the number 1 player in the state of Georgia. And when you watch his film, there's nothing he really doesn't excel at. The first thing you're going to notice is he's not afraid to step into the box, and in fact, he welcomes contact, but he also has the range of all of your prototypical free safeties. This is a unique prospect that has the features of a box safety where he will come down and lay the wood, but he has got the ranginess of your modern free safeties where they're going to get interceptions. He is a straight ball hawk, and if you watch the All-American game, you watch that happen live, where he continued his big season into an All-American game where he really showed out. I can't wait to see what Caleb Downs does. Like Keon Keeley, this is a guy that could see the field as a true freshman, and I don't think people would be too inherently surprised. Huge win for the Crimson Tide there. The next name we need to look at, Caden Proctor, and this was a fun recruiting process. Caden Proctor had a top 2 of Iowa and Alabama, but eventually committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes as he was from the state. Now, that didn't stop Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide from chipping away at the 5-star offensive tackle, someone who personally I thought was the number 1 offensive tackle in a class loaded with offensive line talent. And it's not just relegated to the 5 stars. Guys, this class for the offensive linemen has some dudes in it, 4-star dudes. I've even seen some 3-star guys' films along the offensive line, and I've been very impressed. So great class if you need offensive line talent, and Alabama signed the best of them in Caden Proctor. The dude stands 6'7", 330 pounds plus, and carries it like it's absolutely nothing. A top 10 player in the nation, and deservedly so. Huge win for the Crimson Tide. Continuing on the list of 5 stars, you have Justice Haynes, the number 2 running back in the nation out of the state of Georgia. And what makes this win so unique is this is a Georgia Bulldogs legacy who the Alabama Crimson Tide were able to get in. Now, whenever we watch what Justice Haynes does on the football field, this is a do-it-all back, and he's literally the definition of it. He can do everything. He's a 3-down back. He has some speed. He's got some power. He's dangerous with the ball in his hands as a receiving threat. You name it, he is an absolute threat to defenses, and I know Alabama fans everywhere cannot wait to see what the future holds for he and the other running back on this list, Richard Young, who I was so excited when Richard Young committed to this class. Personally, I feel like Richard Young has slipped real far. He currently ranks as a number 60 prospect. I think he's a 5-star running back. I might be a little bit biased in that. I've been a big Richard Young fan for quite some time, so take my evaluation there with a grain of salt, but really like his game. Love that Alabama got both Justice Haynes and Richard Young. Moving forward, we have Desmond Ricks, who was a top player in the class of 2024, the number 1 cornerback in the class of 2024, who reclassified into the class of 2023 and instantly became a 5-star, and for good reason. Ricks was the number 2 cornerback in the class of 2023, like I said, after having reclassified, and he played at IMG Academy, so you know he's well coached, you know he's tested. He stands 6'1", 170, and came in as the number 25 prospect in the nation. And Alabama needed the secondary help. That's why if you look at the secondary haul they got, it is really impressive. We talked about Caleb Downs. Now we're talking about Desmond Ricks. But there's Tony Mitchell, who was a 5-star prospect for much of his recruiting process and is absolutely one of the most gifted players in the nation. And he's got some versatility. He can play cornerback. He can play safety, something that you love to have to add into your defensive backfield because it allows you to min-max. There's Jaleel Hurley, another huge addition for the Crimson Tide, who is a 5-star cornerback who, once again, Alabama needed because he's got the versatility. Now, I think Hurley will probably be a cornerback, but at the end of the day, you get my point. They had a need in the secondary, and they addressed it in a manner that is conducive to success. I can't wait to see how it all comes together. Now, the next name we're going to talk about is probably my biggest win for the Crimson Tide of the entirety of the recruiting cycle, and that's James Smith. Because when we've talked at length that Alabama needed that ferociousness on the interior of that defensive line, and they got a guy who has an argument that he might be the best in the country at it. 5-star defensive lineman James Smith, standing 6'3", 310 pounds, coming from Carver High School in Alabama, the teammate of Quay Russaw as they were a package deal. But we're going to start with James Smith. James Smith is the number 26 player in the nation, the number 2 interior defensive lineman, and he plays with the ferocity that you love, that quite frankly, the Crimson Tide need. Now, I'm in the process of going back and rewatching Alabama's season for the upteenth time, but this time really taking notes. And one thing I've noticed is Jaheim Otis is going to be a very solid player, but who can the Crimson Tide surround him with? That's going to be a question, because Otis is a guy that not only can flourish if you surround him with the right people, he can help the guys around him flourish because he's a threat, and James Smith is one of those guys that can not only help Otis flourish, Otis will help him flourish. I do believe he has that ability. Very excited. But now we need to talk about the other 5-star that came along with James Smith and Quay Russaw, a guy who, per 24/7 Sports, is counted as an edge, but he has got the versatility to do a few different things. This dude is a flat-out football player. This is the type of guy where you're having a debate. Do we put him at this position or do we put him at this position? Which pretty much is saying, how can we figure out to get him on the football field? This is a cat that's so good at the game of football. How do we get him on the field? And those are the debates you love to have, quite frankly. Quay Russaw is an individual who I think is going to boom. He stands 6'2", 230 pounds, comes in as the number 34 overall prospect in the nation, and I think he has got a really high upside. But he is not the only 5-star edge Alabama signed. Remember, we talked about Keon Keeley. Now we have Quay Russaw, but what about Yonze Pierre? One of the guys who, whenever he committed to Alabama, we talked about it. I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but do not be surprised if he ends up as a 5-star prospect. Here we are. He's a 5-star prospect. And don't get it mistaken. I'm certainly not trying to take any credit for that. I don't think it took a genius to watch Pierre's film and think that guy right there is a 5-star. That's why I'm not surprised at all when he is. This is a very, very gifted guy. He is uber explosive. He is uber aggressive. I'm super excited to see what the future holds. Talking about some wide receivers, what about Jalen Hale, a 5-star wide receiver from the state of Texas, standing 6'1", 185, who really was turning heads during the All-American games. I think a lot of people were very impressed when they got to see Hale stack up against some of the other nation's best wide receivers. I think they realized this is a very, very gifted playmaker, because Jalen Hale has an intriguing blend of size, speed, route running ability, and strength. You love that. Because when we look right now, the Alabama Crimson Tide have an abundance of guys you can plug into the slot and terrorize teams with. I can't wait to see how they're utilized. But what about the outside guys? Well, there's Ja'Cory Brooks. We know how gifted he is. Malik Benson may be a guy on the outside, but continuing to add in that threat on the outside is only going to allow your inside guys to eat more and vice versa. So, very excited about the addition of Jalen Hale. I think it was a huge win. Another guy who's considered an edge, who is a massive win for Alabama, who, if you actually listen to some of the All-American game practices, this guy was MVP of, I believe, 2 days of the All-American game practices, Jordan Renaud out of the state of Texas. Now, this was a battle that came down largely to Oklahoma and Alabama, but it was the Alabama Crimson Tide who got a big win for an individual who stands 6'4", 245 pounds, and like I said, when he got on the biggest stage of his high school career, he played played the biggest ball he had played, and it turned heads. People noticed. This is a name you have got to keep at the forefront of your mind. He is going to be very talented, and it really highlights what a great job this staff did addressing needs they had. And while it's no question it's impressive that Bama is addressing needs and winning those recruiting battles, I'll tell you it's very impressive. The fact that Alabama signed 2 quarterbacks in this recruiting class that both rank as top 15 quarterbacks in the nation, both rank as top 200 players in all of high school football. Eli Holstein, who comes in as the number 8 quarterback in the nation, and Dylan Lonergan, who comes in as the number 13 quarterback in the nation. It's tough enough to get a blue chip quarterback. Nick Saban in Alabama pulled 2 of them. We talked earlier about what a great offensive line class the class of 2023 was going to be able to provide all of college football, and it certainly continues with our next guy, Wilkin Formby, offensive tackle, 6'7", 295 pounds, top 100 player in the nation. This guy is a ton of fun to watch. Really, if you watch any of these Alabama offensive linemen, you've got to be very impressed. They all play with a level of tenacity and ferociousness that you love. Between Formby and Olasalinen, when you turn on their tape, they don't stop until they put someone in the dirt. I love that from my offensive linemen. They play with a chip on their shoulder that you just think that they want to go out there and initiate contact. You love to see it, especially going into the SEC. You're going to be tested, and these are the type of guys that embrace those sort of tests. We talked about what a great addition it was to get Jalen Hale, and a lot of that same logic can carry over to Malik Benson, who I think is going to be a guy to see a lot of production next season. If we listen to little nuggets that were given to us by some of the great beat writers for the Alabama Crimson Tide, Malik Benson, during his few practices with the team, was near unstoppable. They had a really tough time covering him, and I really can't wait to see how that all comes to fruition next year with some of the slot guys, with Brooks. Very excited to see what this offense looks like. Hunter Osborne on the defensive line. Bama once again had a need in the defensive trenches, and they're doing a great job addressing it. I talked at length that was an area they had to address. So whenever I look at this list and I see Hunter Osborne, a top 200 player, whenever I see Edric Hill, a top 200 player, a James Smith, I love the attention this staff gave to the defensive side of the ball, and specifically the defensive trenches. I cannot wait to see how all these guys develop. Ping-ponging from the defensive trenches to the offensive trenches, we have Miles McVay, the offensive tackle, standing 6'6", 358 pounds, coming in as a top 200 player in the nation. Guys, I'm just painting the picture. This is an insane recruiting haul. We're not even outside the top 200 yet, and we've talked about a lot of names. Miles McVay, very talented individual, was a top 5 player in his state of Illinois. One of my favorite things about this class is the work that was put in on the trenches, both offensively and defensively, because not only is that going to be able to help you for your future, but think about it. These guys are going to step into the Crimson Tide practices and be going up against each other. Caden Proctor is going to be going up against Keeley. You're going to have guys such as Eldrick Hill going up against Yanzi Pierre. That is going to make everybody better. I'm absolutely here for it. Now, the next position we're going to talk about is a position that Alabama desperately needed, so much so that they went out in the transfer portal and got another guy, and that's tight end. And we're going to talk about Ty Lockwood, coming from the state of Tennessee and a top 250 player in the nation. I talk about this all the time. If you are breaking in a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, which, by the way, Bama 2 for 2, some of the easiest ways to do that: great running back play, great tight end play. We already know the running back play is going to be phenomenal. Look at the names in that room. Personally, guys, I think that there are some names already on campus for the Crimson Tide that could be huge weapons at the tight end position. Amari Niblack, Danny Lewis, I think they have got really high ceilings, but there is no question. If you have the ability to add in a Ty Lockwood, you do so. No arguments, no second thoughts. You add in a very talented player. Now, speaking of another very talented player, Jaron Hamilton, and this was a guy that flew under the radar. Even now, as a top 300 player in the nation, I don't hear almost any conversation about this young man, and he is going to put college football on notice, mark my words. Jaron Hamilton comes from the state of Florida. He stands 6'1", 188 pounds. He comes in as a top 265 player in the nation, specifically number 263, and he is a burner. When you watch his film, He has got a ton of ability. He's going to shock some people. Remember the name. The other JUCO prospect we've got to talk about, Justin Jefferson, the inside linebacker. And that's an area where Alabama didn't get the haul I think some people thought they would. But when we really dive into the inside linebacker group that the Crimson Tide already has at their disposal, it's an intriguing bunch, and they did some more work in the transfer portal. And remember, Quay Russaw is listed as an edge, but he has got all of the ability to play inside or outside linebacker, so that versatility is going to be huge. But Justin Jefferson, guys, this name right here is one I'm very excited about. If you turn on his film, this is a modern linebacker through and through. Number 2 player in JUCO, number 1 linebacker in JUCO. Alabama fans everywhere need to be very, very happy that he chose the Crimson Tide. Heading into the home stretch, we have Brayson Hubbard, the athlete, coming in as the number 279 player. And this was actually a name that the insiders were talking about, saying, hey, he's going to be very impressive. Do not get it twisted. This kid right here is going to be very, very impressive, which is kind of a good problem to have whenever we look at this class, and we can say that about so many of these individuals. We've said it about every single one of them, and stop me when I'm lying. They've all been very impressive because this class is wild. Next guy is one of my favorites personally, Cole Adams, Oklahoma wide receiver, standing 5'10", 180 pounds, and he comes in as a top 300 prospect, specifically number 300 in the nation, and that is after an injury basically sidelined him for his entire senior season. So this is a dude that if he was healthy, if he was able to play, he could have been ranked even higher than that. I don't really have many doubts about that, but he's going to show the nation why Alabama wanted him so intently. He is a slot demon. Call him Slotty Pippen. Can't wait to see what he does once he steps on campus. And finally, the final 2 names we need to talk about, Raquez McElderry, the inside offensive lineman that I think is very, very gifted. This is the guy we were talking about at the beginning of the video that really rose throughout the final stretch of his high school recruiting campaign, and for good reason. He is just outside the top 300 range, but do not get it mistaken. When you flip on the film, there's a lot to like. Can't wait to see how he continues to develop. And I love the offensive line coach Alabama has, Coach Eric Wolford, because when we're watching the film from last season, it starts off a mess. But as the season continues to progress, you see the offensive line really start taking form, really get more confidence in themselves, which is what you really want to see. And the final name, Connor Talty, kicker from Chicago. And this is a really good kicker. The number 3 kicker in the nation, but all special teams guys are going to be 3-star prospects. And for Alabama fans everywhere, kicking is something they would rather have taken care of than have to worry about it, because they went so many years worrying about field goals and whether or not they'd be able to make the big ones. Getting in top kickers is exactly a way you can ensure you have a good chance of making them. So we've gone through the entirety of this recruiting class, all the names. Let me know who's your favorite. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.